Hi everyone, welcome. The last time we checked in on my newest bin here, we first came in with this stuff here. It's a solution of the mosquito dunks, stuff that you put into standing outside water on your property if you don't want to have it become a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and it's been found to be useful when you're worm farming to control certain types of flying insects. Obviously it's going to control mosquitoes, that's what it's made for and marketed as, but it also helps control the populations of, I see one already, right there. And I saw another one right here. No, that's a spider. Okay, I saw one. I originally thought that I had seen no more of these little guys, but there's a clear holdout. So it's probably a more senior flying insect, because the way the BTI works is that it prevents the next generation from forming into an adult fly. Kind of nips it in a juvenile stage of its development. Here's another one of these guys. So I'm not really after the flying insect itself to spray it with this stuff. It's really just the material where I believe there could potentially still be a few lingering baby flying insects still waiting to mature to the point where they can evolve or transform or whatever into a adult flying insect. But I've only seen one. Now the little guy's all over my hand. I think it's an improvement, because last time we definitely saw a bunch of them. And I don't know if it's necessary to go too crazy with this stuff. It just seems to me like if I spread it evenly across the top surface before blending everything in, I increase my odds of actually having this stuff come in contact with these little guys. So whatever, it's already so low, it's just pumping air at this point. So we had that coffee filter resting out here across the top to indicate to us where we last fed. And the last time we fed, we didn't really have stuff that had been in the freezer. I just had some this and that, which came from here and there, obviously. So there was stuff like onions. There was, I don't even remember what it was. There was a bunch of foods added, which never had the chance to be frozen first, which is kind of a common thing in most of my worm bin feedings. And this wasn't from last time. This goes back a couple feedings. This thing probably looked a lot like this when it was still intact. And that bulbous piece of it broke apart pretty easily. Last time too, we sort of chipped away here on this loose end of it. You see worms hanging out inside of it, but let's allow it to remain intact to some degree if we can. It's kind of interesting to check in on some of these slow composting things like the stem of a pumpkin here. And you know, as long as we're talking about pumpkin, that is what we're feeding them today. And you know what? I had this idea. Perhaps the pumpkin can be fed to them the same way the stuff they got last week was fed to them, which was not frozen. So that's the big twist, you know. Not a really big, major difference, but definitely a sidestep from what I do normally around here, which is, you know, chop stuff up like that into worm bin feeding size particle food matter and then freeze it. It all goes in my freezer, and then it could sit there for who knows how long, as long as it needs to, before I get around to feeding it to the worms. So this stuff just happened to not have that treatment from the very start. I could feel lots of worms. Just as I'm even like probing down and checking out this little pile of wormies, I could feel them in even greater numbers right below my fingers. So this must be leftovers from the feeding they got 12 days ago. Or at least that's what I'm guessing. Or at least the residual worm party is from it, probably. That feeding we gave them last time 12 days ago was feeding number 5, I believe. I did look at my spreadsheet, and I took note of some of the values on there. The age of the bin, 53 days old. The number of feedings, pretty sure it's 5. So this will be feeding number 6. And I guess the other important variable, one that's kind of in transition, in a growth spurt right now, is me collecting the estimates based on what we saw in the last video of how many additional worms were placed in here. Because we emptied the bait box from the old castings these little guys left behind, and I've already collected a number of estimates from different people, but I don't feel like, only 12 days later, we probably still have a few more people willing to kick in their estimates on how many worms populate this system. And then at some point, we'll just tally up those numbers and update our average estimated worm count for this system. But prior to the addition of the worms, it was over 3,200 worms. And with the addition of those bait box worms that we rounded up last time, I'm wondering what people think we have in here as far as additional worms added to the original estimate. I mean, if you want to participate in the estimate of how many worms we originally populated the system with in the very beginning, that would be an entirely different video to watch and comment on, naturally. Although I'm not even sure if I would still update the records for a worm count estimate that comes in so late in the game already that perhaps the system's already been retired or something like that, and then to be updating its estimated worm count based on very late coming feedback doesn't seem like it's worth the effort. So I'm sure there is some sort of a cutoff point, but I've never really tried enforcing anything like that. Oh, as long as we're feeding unfrozen stuff today, I've also got some stuff that's very similar to what they got last time. We saw bits and pieces of the avocado's skin over here, but I've not seen the pit. But the pit went in as part of the feeding last time too. So that's an additional kind of little object I was curious to see the progress of. In this case, I took one of those avocado seeds and I sliced it up into little discs, which I assume is going to just help with the breakdown process. And besides a pit, an avocado pit, I also believe that this system was deployed with material from one of the bins that I had in which a cork had been placed and had been running, from the start to the finish of that system. And I assume just came over with the worms into here, but I've not yet bumped into it. Of all the check-ins we've had on this system, and feedings and inspections, perhaps that's the reason I go a little bit more thorough here, because I am still very interested in bumping into and finally running into the cork. So it's the part of the reason I'm just sort of fishing around a little bit more than I would in most feedings, because it would be kind of cool to bump into that thing finally. It's got to be in here. I just haven't had the good fortune of finding it yet. Although, yep, that's it right there. How do you like that? Perhaps it was just a matter of really wanting to finally find it. So this is a cork. One of these days, I'm going to take Plant Obsessed's suggestion. I think it was her who said, why not rinse that thing off one of these days so we can really take a good look at how it's coming along as far as, getting worn down in the worm bin. Not from me breaking it or chipping away at it, but just the natural degradation of the material itself into what it has become over time. So, all right, whatever. Mission accomplished. That was fun. I'm glad we found that. It's kind of making me really wonder. It's like, where the heck is that cork? So I think we're going to keep to the idea of no bedding, no fresh bedding for this system, mainly because I still feel like I'm crowded. I'm crowded with all the material that makes up this system. I try to, excavate a little bit of a feeding space for myself, and I right away already feel like I'm, cramped for space because I can't really go much higher anywhere. This stuff is definitely a good distance above the rim of the container. It'd be very easy to slide some of that right off and make a huge mess, but we're not going to do that. So I am very glad to see that as far as flying insects goes, it does seem like the mosquito dunks is doing its job, with us only bumping into one flying insect as far as I could tell. Perhaps when I'm watching the video I'll feel like I saw more than just one. So either way, it does still seem like a vast difference from what we observed last time when we saw quite a number of flying insects cruising around in here during our check-in. So, pretty nice feeding. Let's give them some grit. and I did not see the pit, the whole pit from the avocado that was fed last time. I was kind of hoping to be able to keep it together with these discs, these sliced up pieces of avocado pit, so we can compare them in their breakdown process. Perhaps in a future check-in we'll bump into that whole avocado pit, because that's going to last a while. It's going to take a little bit before it finally starts to break down. But to have not found it today, I don't think is too big of a problem. One thing we did weird last time was we forgot to add that grit, you know, the pulverized eggshell that I just sprinkled in. Forgot to add that last time as part of the feeding. So at the end, right before covering up, we just took some of it and sprinkled it right out onto the top surface. And I see lots of little white specks, which I'm assuming are all springtails. I don't think I see any of that grit left over, because they really do seem to come for that stuff and, you know, just scoop it all right up, because they really like that stuff. So I think, you know, a lot of people would probably criticize my decision to keep going with this top covering, but I do still feel like we have this little bit of reserve here. Even though the middle portion of it is so far gone, seems like we can get all this extra coverage just by unfolding this little segment that sort of protects itself from being destroyed just by being folded over on itself. But now it's like a little parachute. While we thought for a moment there that we had virtually no top covering newspaper, we're pretty much back to full coverage. Alright everyone, that's it for our check-in with the red wigglers. System's doing really fun. Perhaps this will become our unfrozen container, where we feed stuff that's not frozen, always kind of looking for a little excuse to break away from the norm, and that might be a good idea for this one. Let me know what you think. If you think that's a good idea, maybe we'll follow through. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.